The piercing wail of the emergency siren shattered the morning calm at Edwards Air Force Base, like glass breaking against concrete. Colonel Connor Blake, commanding officer of the elite F-22 Raptor Squadron, stood in the middle of the tarmac with his perfectly pressed flight suit catching the California desert sun. His square jaw tightened with amusement as he watched the K-9 unit compound in the distance, where several handlers were conducting their morning routines with military working dogs. "Dog walkers," he said with a dismissive laugh, turning to the group of fighter pilots gathered around him for the morning briefing. The words carried across the open space with the kind of casual cruelty that comes from absolute confidence in one's superiority. While we're pushing Mach 2 and defending American airspace, they're sitting over there playing fetch with oversized German shepherds. The pilots around him chuckled, some more enthusiastically than others. Lieutenant Ethan Ross, Blake's second in command, added his own commentary. "I heard they get combat pay for picking up dog droppings. Must be nice having such a dangerous job." Sergeant Ashley Harper, standing barely 5 feet 5 inches in her desert camouflage uniform, was checking the training equipment when the mockery reached her ears. Her blonde hair was pulled back in the tight bun required by regulations, not a strand out of place despite the growing heat of the morning. Her blue eyes remained focused on the task at hand, showing no reaction to the insults floating across the 100 meters separating the K-9 compound from the flight line. She'd heard it all before. The jokes, the dismissive comments, the suggestions that anyone working with dogs was somehow less of a soldier than those who flew jets or carried rifles into combat. 17 military working dogs lay resting in the shade of the training structures, their bodies relaxed but never truly at ease. The pack included everything from Belgian Malinois with their wolf-like intensity to German shepherds trained in explosive detection, each one representing years of specialized training worth more than most people's houses. They appeared normal to any casual observer, just dogs taking a break from their morning drills, but their ears suddenly perked up in unison, swiveling toward the fuel depot 500 meters to the east. The lead dog, a massive black and tan Malinois named Max, rose to his feet with the fluid grace of a predator sensing danger. Ashley noticed the change immediately. 7 years of working with military dogs had taught her to read their body language better than she could read most humans. Max's hackles weren't raised in aggression, but in warning. His nose pointed toward the fuel depot, and a low whine escaped his throat that she'd only heard once before, during a training exercise that had gone terribly wrong. 1 second later, the world exploded. The blast from the fuel depot hit like a physical force, a wall of superheated air and sound that knocked several people to their knees. A column of fire shot 30 meters into the sky, black smoke billowing upward in a mushroom cloud that looked like something out of a war zone. The heat wave rolled across the base like an invisible tsunami, and Ashley could feel her exposed skin prickling even at this distance. Windows in nearby buildings shattered in sequence, the sound like automatic gunfire as the pressure wave expanded outward. Colonel Blake stumbled, his cocky demeanor evaporating as quickly as the morning dew under the heat of the explosion. "What the hell was that?" He grabbed his radio, switching to the emergency frequency. "Control, this is Blake. We have a major explosion at the fuel depot. I need damage assessment and emergency response immediately." Ashley was already moving, her hands flying over the equipment as she secured the dog's training area. But something was wrong. The 17 dogs weren't panicking like animals should during a disaster. They were organizing, forming into a pack structure she'd seen them use during tactical exercises. Max stood at the front, his body coiled with tension, his eyes locked on something beyond the wall of flames now spreading from the ruptured fuel tanks. Master Sergeant Samuel Wade, a grizzled veteran of the K-9 unit with 23 years of service, jogged over to Ashley's position. His weathered face showed the kind of concern that came from recognizing a situation spiraling out of control. "Harper, we need to evacuate these animals now. That fire's spreading toward the maintenance hangars." Ashley shook her head, her attention focused on Max and the other dogs. "Something's not right, Sergeant. Look at them. They're not afraid of the fire." "Of course they're afraid," Wade replied, though his voice carried less certainty as he observed the dog's unusual behavior. "Every living thing is afraid of fire. It's basic survival instinct." The radio on Ashley's belt crackled to life with a transmission that made her blood run cold. "Emergency! Emergency! This is Chief Mason Carter in Maintenance Hangar 3. We have 23 personnel trapped in here. The main exit is blocked by debris from the explosion, and fire is spreading to our position. We need immediate assistance." Ashley's mind processed the information in milliseconds, calculating distances, wind direction, and the rate of fire spread. The maintenance hangar was directly in the path of the expanding inferno. Fire crews were still minutes away from being fully deployed. By the time they arrived and assessed the situation, it might be too late. Max barked once, a sharp, commanding sound that cut through the chaos. The other 16 dogs immediately fell into formation behind him, their bodies tense and ready. Ashley had seen this before, not in training, but in her memories of a place she'd tried very hard to forget. The dogs weren't preparing to flee. They were preparing to advance. Tell us where you're watching from today. Are you a veteran, active duty, or someone who supports our military families? Your stories inspire us to keep sharing these incredible moments of courage. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next story of military valor. Colonel Blake's voice boomed across the emergency frequency, full of authority and decisiveness. All personnel, evacuate to designated safety zones immediately. Fire suppression teams are en route. Do not attempt individual rescue operations. I repeat, do not attempt unauthorized rescue operations. Ashley felt the weight of the order, the kind of command that ended careers if disobeyed. But she also felt something else, something that had been dormant for 3 years since she'd arrived at Edwards and accepted her quiet role as just another dog handler. It was the same feeling she'd had in the mountains of Afghanistan when everything had gone wrong, and the only thing standing between life and death had been her ability to trust her instincts over orders. Lieutenant Rachel Morrison, a medical officer from the base hospital, came running toward the K9 compound. Her red hair was already coming loose from its regulation style, and her face showed the kind of focused determination that came from years of emergency medicine. Ashley, we need to get these dogs out of here. The smoke alone could kill them if the fire gets any closer. But even as Rachel spoke, Max took 3 deliberate steps toward the fire, not away from it. The other dogs followed, maintaining their formation with military precision. They weren't running from danger. They were moving toward it with purpose. They hear something, Ashley said quietly, her voice barely audible over the growing roar of the flames and the sirens now wailing across the base. Something we can't. Wade grabbed her shoulder, his grip firm but not unkind. Harper, these are valuable military assets. We can't just let them run into a fire because they're hearing things. Colonel Blake will have our heads if we lose 17 MWDs to panic behavior. Ashley turned to face him, and for the first time since she'd arrived at Edwards, Samuel Wade saw something in her eyes that made him take an involuntary step back. It wasn't anger or fear. It was the kind of cold calculation he had only seen in combat veterans who'd been in situations where every decision meant life or death. They're not panicking, she said with absolute certainty. They're responding to something specific. Those people trapped in the hangar, they're probably making sounds outside our hearing range. Ultrasonic frequencies from stressed vocal cords, vibrations through the ground from their movement. The dogs know exactly where they are. Blake's voice crackled over the radio again, this time directed at the K9 unit specifically. K9 unit, this is Colonel Blake. Evacuate those animals immediately. That's a direct order. We're not losing military assets to animal instinct. Ashley looked at the radio, then at the 17 dogs now facing the inferno, then at the wall of flames growing larger with each passing second. She thought about the 23 people trapped in that hangar, their voices probably growing weaker as smoke filled their lungs. She thought about orders and career consequences and the safe, predictable life she'd built here as an anonymous dog handler who no one looked at twice. Then Max barked again, this time turning his massive head to look directly at her. In his dark eyes, she saw the same thing she'd seen in another dog's eyes 3 years ago, right before everything changed. It was trust, absolute and complete, the kind that only existed between warriors who'd faced death together. Ashley unclipped her radio and set it on the equipment table. The gesture was deliberate, unmistakable. She was removing herself from the chain of command, making herself unreachable for further orders. Wade's eyes widened as he realized what she was doing. Harper, don't be stupid. Your career will be over. Blake doesn't forgive insubordination, especially from support personnel. Ashley pulled on her tactical gloves with practiced efficiency, her movements economical and precise. 23 people are about to die, Sergeant. Their careers will be over too, permanently. She gave a hand signal so quick and subtle that Wade almost missed it, but the 17 dogs saw it clearly. Max's entire body changed, shifting from readiness to action in an instant. He launched himself toward the fire, not in a panicked run, but in the kind of tactical movement pattern Ashley had drilled into him during hundreds of hours of training. The other dogs followed in perfect synchronization, spreading out into a search formation that maximized coverage while maintaining communication distance. "Stop those animals!" Blake's voice carried across the tarmac as he saw the dogs racing toward the danger zone. Several security personnel started moving to intercept, but Ashley was already running, following her dogs into the expanding wall of heat and smoke. Behind her, she heard Blake shouting into his radio, "Security! I want Sergeant Harper detained immediately. She's violating direct orders and endangering military assets. Stop her before she gets those dogs killed." But Ashley was no longer listening to the colonel's words. Her world had narrowed to the 17 dogs ahead of her, and the 23 lives hanging in the balance. As she ran, her body fell into a rhythm it remembered from years of training most people at Edwards didn't know existed. Her breathing regulated automatically despite the exertion, her stride adjusted to the terrain without conscious thought, and her eyes tracked multiple variables simultaneously: wind patterns, smoke density, structural integrity of the buildings near the fire. Rachel Morrison watched Ashley disappear into the smoke with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Did she just throw away her entire career for a pack of dogs? Samuel Wade shook his head slowly, his experienced eyes having caught something in Ashley's movement that the others had missed. The way she ran wasn't like someone who spent their days playing fetch and filling water bowls. It was like someone who had been trained to move through hostile environments where every step could be your last. "No," he said quietly, more to himself than to Rachel. "She threw it away for 23 people those dogs are going to find." The heat hit Ashley like a living thing as she entered the outer perimeter of the danger zone. The air itself seemed to burn her lungs with each breath, and the smoke reduced visibility to less than 10 meters. But she could hear the dogs ahead, their barks cutting through the roar of flames with the clarity of purpose. Max's voice was distinctive, a deep, commanding sound that the other dogs oriented on like a compass point. She found them arranged in a semicircle around a section of the maintenance hangar, where the wall had partially collapsed. Through the gaps in the structure, she could hear voices, weak but definitely human. The dogs were indicating on the location with the kind of precision that came from thousands of hours of training, but they weren't trying to enter, they were waiting for her. Ashley assessed the situation in seconds. The main entrance to the hangar was completely blocked by burning debris, probably from secondary explosions of equipment inside. The wall where the dogs had gathered showed stress fractures from the heat, and several steel support beams were already glowing orange. The structure could collapse at any moment, but there was a gap near the foundation, where the blast had shifted the wall outward, creating an opening just large enough for a person to squeeze through if they knew exactly how to navigate it. She dropped to her knees beside Max, running her hands along the wall to feel for heat patterns and structural weaknesses. The movement was automatic, trained into her through repetition until it became instinct. Max watched her intently, his body tense with readiness to act on whatever command came next. Through the smoke, she saw two figures approaching, Blake and several security personnel, their faces covered with wet cloths against the smoke. The colonel's eyes were blazing with fury as he saw her crouched by the damaged building. "Sergeant Harper, you are under arrest for violating direct orders and endangering military property. Step away from that building immediately." Ashley ignored him completely, her attention focused on the wall. She found what she was looking for, a section where the metal had buckled outward, creating a weak point that could be exploited. But she'd need leverage and precise application of force, the kind that required tools she didn't have. Then Max did something that made everyone present freeze in surprise. The massive Malinois moved to a specific spot on the wall and began digging with his front paws. Not randomly, but with purpose. The other dogs immediately joined him, working in coordination to clear debris from the base of the wall. Within seconds, they had exposed a maintenance access panel that had been hidden by equipment that fell during the explosion. Ashley didn't hesitate. She grabbed the panel and pulled with all her strength, using her body weight and leverage in a way that suggested formal training in breaching operations. The panel came free with a shriek of metal, revealing a narrow crawl space that led into the hangar's interior. "How did you know that was there?" Blake demanded, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. Ashley didn't answer. She was already shimming through the opening, her body contorting in ways that spoke of extensive flexibility training. Max tried to follow, but she gave him a sharp hand signal that stopped him instantly. The dog whined but obeyed, taking up a guard position at the entrance. Inside the hangar, the situation was even worse than she'd imagined. The smoke was so thick she could barely see 3 feet ahead, and the heat was overwhelming. But she could hear voices now, coughing and calling for help from somewhere deeper in the structure. She moved toward them, staying low where the smoke was thinner, her hands feeling along the walls for guidance. She found the first group of 5 maintenance personnel huddled in a corner where an overturned tool cabinet had provided minimal shelter from falling debris. Chief Mason Carter was among them, his face blackened with soot but his eyes alert. "Who's there?" he called out, squinting through the smoke. "Sergeant Harper, K-9 unit. We're getting you out of here." Ashley's voice was steady despite the environmental conditions that would have most people panicking. "How many others?" 18 more, scattered throughout the hangar. Some are injured. The smoke got thick so fast, people got separated and disoriented. Ashley processed this information while simultaneously noting the structural sounds around her. The building was dying, groaning under the thermal stress. They had minutes at most before catastrophic collapse. She needed to locate 18 people in a smoke-filled maze of equipment and debris, get them to the exit she'd created, and do it all before the roof came down. She keyed the emergency whistle on her tactical vest, 3 sharp blasts that cut through the chaos. Immediately, she heard responses from outside, not human, but canine. Max and the other dogs were barking in sequence, creating an audio beacon that would guide people toward the exit even in zero visibility. "Follow that sound," she told Carter and his group. "Stay low, move fast. The dogs will guide you out." "What about the others?" Carter asked. "I'll find them." She moved deeper into the hangar, using a search pattern that maximized coverage while minimizing time. Every 30 seconds she whistled, and the dogs responded, maintaining the audio lifeline. She found 3 more people near a collapsed shelving unit, 2 more trapped under a fallen workbench that she leveraged up using a pipe as a fulcrum, and another group of 4 who'd taken shelter in a tool cage. But that still left 8 people unaccounted for, and the building's death groans were getting louder. A section of the roof collapsed 20 meters to her left, sending a shower of sparks and burning insulation raining down. Time was running out faster than she'd calculated. Then she heard something that made her blood freeze, a dog barking from inside the building. Not from the exit where she'd left them, but from somewhere ahead of her in the smoke. One of the dogs had found another way in and was searching independently. She followed the sound and found Rex, a German shepherd trained in explosive detection, standing over 2 unconscious maintenance workers who had been overcome by smoke. The dog looked at her with urgent eyes, then grabbed one of the men's sleeves in his teeth and started pulling. Ashley understood immediately. Rex had entered through another breach point and found these people on his own initiative. It was the kind of independent decision-making that most handlers would say was impossible for a dog, but Ashley knew better. She'd seen it before, in places where the normal rules didn't apply. Working together, she and Rex managed to drag the 2 unconscious men toward the exit. The journey felt like hours, though it was probably less than 3 minutes. The smoke was so thick now she couldn't see Rex even though he was right beside her. She navigated purely by sound and touch, trusting the dog's superior senses to guide them. When they finally emerged through the gap, dragged the last 2 men into the relatively clear air outside, Ashley found herself facing a scene she hadn't expected. All 23 maintenance personnel were accounted for, sitting or lying on the ground at a safe distance from the burning building, being treated by medical personnel who'd arrived during the rescue. The 17 military working dogs sat in a perfect line beside them, their fur singed and dirty, but their eyes bright with accomplishment. And standing in front of them all was Colonel Blake, his face a mask of conflicting emotions as he watched the building they had just evacuated collapse entirely, the roof caving in with a roar that shook the ground. If the rescue had taken even 1 minute longer, everyone inside would have been dead. "You disobeyed a direct order," Blake said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Ashley stood up slowly, her uniform torn and blackened, smoke still rising from her hair. She met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, sir, I did. Those dogs could have been killed. You could have been killed. You risked valuable military assets on a hunch. I risked them on training and instinct, sir, and all 23 people are alive because of it." Blake's jaw worked like he was chewing on words that tasted bitter. Around them, a crowd was gathering as word spread about what had happened. Fighter pilots, maintenance crews, medical staff, and administration personnel all drawn by the drama of the moment. Among them, Ashley noticed several people recording with their phones, undoubtedly capturing the confrontation between the decorated colonel and the smoke-stained sergeant. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Blake's voice rose, playing to the crowd now. "You're a dog handler who got lucky. Those animals could have gotten everyone killed with their untrained behavior." It was Master Sergeant Wade who spoke up, surprising everyone, including himself. "Sir, with respect, those dogs' behavior wasn't untrained. I've been working with MWDs for over 2 decades, and what I just witnessed was tactical coordination at a level I've never seen outside of special operations units." Blake turned his glare on Wade. "Are you defending her insubordination, Master Sergeant?" "I'm stating facts, sir. Sergeant Harper directed those dogs through a complex search and rescue operation using hand signals and audio cues I don't recognize from standard K9 training. Either she's been conducting unauthorized training or..." Wade paused, looking at Ashley with new understanding. "Or she learned those techniques somewhere else." The crowd was growing larger, and Blake could feel the narrative slipping away from him. These people had just watched 23 of their colleagues save from certain death, and the hero of the moment was a woman he'd been publicly mocking not an hour ago. He needed to regain control of the situation. "Sergeant Harper, you will report to my office immediately for disciplinary action. As for these dogs, they'll need to be evaluated for post-trauma response before they can return to duty. We can't have military assets that don't follow proper protocols." Ashley stood perfectly still for a moment, and in that stillness, something shifted in her posture. It was subtle, the kind of change most people wouldn't notice, but several veterans in the crowd straightened, unconsciously in response. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted slightly, and when she spoke, her voice carried a different quality than before. "The dogs followed their training perfectly, Colonel. They detected human distress signals, maintained tactical formation during approach, established a perimeter at the breach point, and provided audio guidance for evacuation. Everything they did was textbook Special Operations K9 protocol." Blake's eyes narrowed. "We don't teach Special Operations protocols to basic military working dogs, Sergeant. Where exactly would they have learned these techniques?" Before Ashley could respond, a new voice cut through the crowd. "They learned them from one of the best handlers I've ever worked with." Everyone turned to see Captain Noah Mitchell walking toward them. He was still in his flight suit from the morning training exercises, but his expression was serious in a way that made several people take notice. Noah had a reputation as someone who didn't speak unless he had something important to say, and his position as one of the base's most decorated pilots gave his words weight. Blake's expression showed irritation at the interruption. "Captain Mitchell, this doesn't concern you." Noah kept walking until he was standing directly beside Ashley, his positioning deliberate and unmistakable. "Actually, sir, it does. 3 years ago, I was part of a joint operation in Kandahar province. Our unit was pinned down by enemy fire, cut off from reinforcement. We would have died there if not for a K9 team that managed to identify and neutralize threats in zero visibility conditions." The crowd had grown silent, sensing something significant was happening. Noah continued, his eyes never leaving Blake's face. "The handler of that K9 team used techniques I'd never seen before. Hand signals that could be recognized in complete darkness, audio cues that worked even in combat noise, and dogs trained to operate independently when separated from their handler. It was like watching a symphony where every dog knew not just their part but everyone else's too." He paused, then looked directly at Ashley. "I never got to properly thank that handler. The operation was classified, and by the time the smoke cleared, they were already being extracted for another mission. But I never forgot the call sign." Blake's impatience was evident. "What does this have to do with anything, Captain?" Noah smiled slightly, the expression carrying more weight than humor. "The call sign was Ghost 7, part of a unit that officially doesn't exist, handling dogs trained for operations that never happened in places we've never been." The silence that followed was profound. Several people in the crowd were typing on their phones, undoubtedly looking up whatever information they could find about Ghost 7, though they would find very little. Such units were buried under layers of classification that most military personnel never even knew existed. Ashley's expression remained neutral, but her eyes had taken on a 1,000-yard stare that combat veterans recognized immediately. She was looking at something none of them could see, remembering something she'd probably tried very hard to forget. Lieutenant Rachel Morrison stepped forward from where she'd been treating some of the rescued maintenance workers for smoke inhalation. Her medical training had taught her to observe details others missed, and she'd been watching Ashley carefully since the rescue. Sergeant Harper, when you were pulling those men out, I noticed something. The way you checked their airways, positioned them for transport, even the way you supported their necks. That's not basic first aid. That's combat medicine. The kind they teach to people who operate in places where medevac isn't coming. The crowd's attention was completely focused now. Blake could feel the situation spiraling entirely out of his control. This was supposed to be a simple disciplinary action against an insubordinate sergeant. Instead, it was turning into something else entirely. "Sergeant Harper," Blake said, trying to regain authority through formal address. "I'm ordering you to explain your background and training. Where did you learn these techniques?" Ashley looked at him for a long moment, and in that look, Blake saw something that made him unconsciously take a step back. It wasn't defiance or anger. It was the kind of weariness that came from carrying secrets that were heavier than most people could imagine. "With respect, sir," she said quietly, "you're not cleared for that information." The gasps from the crowd were audible. A sergeant had just told a colonel that he wasn't cleared for information about her background. It was either the height of insubordination or... "She's right," came another voice from the crowd. This time it was Major Benjamin Santos from Intelligence, his usually jovial face serious. "I ran her name through our databases after the rescue. Sergeant Harper's full record is classified beyond my access level, and I have top secret clearance. Whatever she did before coming here, it's locked behind doors that require Pentagon-level authorization to open." Blake's face had gone from red to pale. He was beginning to realize he might have made a significant error in judgment, but his pride wouldn't let him back down, not in front of this many witnesses. Classified or not, she still violated direct orders. That's grounds for court-martial regardless of her background. "Actually, sir," Samuel Wade interjected, "according to military regulations, personnel have not just the right, but the obligation to disregard orders that would result in preventable loss of life. Sergeant Harper made a tactical decision based on information her specialized training allowed her to recognize. The dog's behavior indicated survivors in a location mechanical sensors hadn't detected. She acted on that information and saved 23 lives." The maintenance personnel who had been rescued were now on their feet, supported by medical staff but determined to be part of this moment. Chief Carter stepped forward, his voice hoarse from smoke but clear. "Colonel Blake, with all due respect, we owe our lives to Sergeant Harper and those dogs. We were dying in there. The smoke was so thick we couldn't find our way out even when we heard the evacuation alarms. Those dogs barking guided us like lighthouse beacons. And Sergeant Harper came in after us when everyone else was ordered to stay away." One by one, the other rescued personnel voiced their agreement, their soot-covered faces earnest with gratitude. The phones recording the scene captured it all. 23 lives saved, 17 dogs who'd refused to abandon them, and one handler who'd chosen lives over career. Blake found himself in an impossible position. He couldn't punish someone who'd just saved nearly 24 lives without looking like a villain, but backing down would mean admitting he'd been wrong about everything. The value of the K-9 unit, the capabilities of support personnel, and most importantly, his judgment of Ashley Harper herself. But before he could find a way to salvage the situation, the dogs made the decision for him. Max, the lead Malinois who'd initiated the rescue, stood up from his position and walked over to Ashley. But instead of his usual position at her left side, he circled behind her and sat at her right, his body angled outward in a protective stance. One by one, the other 16 dogs followed, forming a semicircle around her, their faces toward the crowd. It wasn't aggressive, but the message was unmistakable. They were protecting their handler from any threat, even if that threat wore a colonel's insignia. The symbolism wasn't lost on the crowd. These military working dogs, trained to obey without question, had just chosen their loyalty. And they'd chosen the sergeant who'd run into fire with them over the colonel who'd ordered them to abandon their instincts. Blake's radio crackled to life, saving him from having to respond immediately. "Colonel Blake, this is General Benjamin Cruz. I'm 5 minutes out from Edwards. I want a full briefing on the explosion and rescue operation, and I want to meet the personnel responsible for saving those 23 lives." The general's tone left no room for interpretation. News of the incident had already reached high command, and they were coming to see for themselves what had happened. Blake knew that his next words would likely determine not just Ashley's fate, but his own career trajectory. "Yes, sir," he responded to the radio, then looked at Ashley. "General Cruz wants to meet you, Sergeant. I suggest you make yourself presentable." Ashley looked down at her smoke-stained, torn uniform, then at the 17 dogs still maintaining their protective formation around her. "With respect, sir, I think the General will understand that some things are more important than appearance." As if in response, Max barked once, and all 17 dogs stood as one, ready to move with their handler wherever she went. The crowd parted as Ashley walked through them, the dogs maintaining perfect formation around her. She didn't march like someone going to face judgment. She walked like someone who'd already faced the worst life could offer and survived. Behind her, Blake stood alone on the scorched tarmac, watching the woman he'd dismissed as just a dog walker, being followed by a crowd of people whose lives she'd saved. Some moments in military service defined careers, others destroyed them. And sometimes, Blake was beginning to realize they did both at the same time. The base's emergency response center had been converted into an impromptu command post, with maps, communications equipment, and status boards showing the ongoing firefighting efforts. General Benjamin Cruz stood at the center of it all, his silver hair and weathered face marking him as someone who had risen through the ranks the hard way. He wasn't the kind of general who led from behind a desk. The Purple Heart and Silver Star on his uniform testified to that. When Ashley entered with her escort of 17 dogs, the general's eyes went immediately to the animals. They were covered in soot, their fur singed in places, but they maintained perfect military bearing as they arranged themselves around the room's perimeter. "Sergeant Harper," the general said, his voice carrying the authority of 40 years of military service. "I've been briefed on the rescue operation. 23 lives saved, 0 casualties. Executed in under 15 minutes, despite extreme environmental hazards. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir," Ashley replied, standing at attention despite her exhaustion. "And you did this after being ordered to evacuate?" "Yes, sir." The general studied her for a long moment. Then his attention shifted to the dogs. "Are these the animals that performed the search and rescue?" "They are, sir." General Cruz walked slowly around the room, examining each dog. They remained perfectly still, but their eyes tracked his movement with intelligent awareness. When he reached Max, the Malinois met his gaze directly, something most dogs wouldn't do with a stranger. "This one's the leader," the general said. It wasn't a question. "Max, sir. 7 years old, certified in explosives detection, patrol work, and search and rescue. And the others?" Ashley could have given him a standard rundown of certifications and training levels. Instead, she chose truth. "They're the best unit I've ever worked with, sir. Each one is capable of independent decision-making while maintaining pack cohesion. They can read human distress signals across multiple sensory channels and coordinate their responses without human direction when necessary." "That's not standard military working dog training," the general observed. "No, sir, it's not." The general returned to face her directly. "Sergeant, I served in Afghanistan from 2008 to 2012. I heard stories about K9 units that could do things that seemed impossible. Dogs that could detect IEDs from 50 meters away, that could track targets through urban environments where human intelligence said tracking was impossible. There was one unit in particular that became legend among special operations forces. They called them Ghost Pack. The room had gone completely silent. Even the dogs seemed to sense the weight of the moment. "Ghost Pack officially never existed," the general continued. "Their handlers were selected from the absolute best across all service branches, put through training that made SEAL qualification look like summer camp. They operated in places we couldn't send regular forces, doing things that couldn't be done by conventional means." He paused, studying Ashley's face. In October of 2019, Ghost Pack was deployed on Operation Night Howl. The mission was to locate and extract a CIA asset who'd been compromised in Taliban-controlled territory. The intelligence was solid, the planning was perfect, but it was a trap. The entire unit was ambushed. Official records list them all as killed in action. Ashley's breathing had changed, becoming shallow and controlled. Max moved closer to her, pressing against her leg in a gesture of support that was subtle but unmistakable. "But there were rumors," the general said softly. "Rumors that one handler survived, that she managed to get 3 dogs out and use them to rescue a trapped SEAL team before disappearing into the mountains. The SEALs reported being saved by what they described as phantoms in the storm, a handler and dogs that moved like smoke through enemy positions. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, setting it on the table. It was a challenge coin, but not just any coin. This one was black with a silver wolf's head and the number 7. "I've carried this for 3 years," the general said. "It was given to me by a SEAL team leader who said a Ghost 7 saved his entire unit. He said if I ever met her, I should return it with his gratitude." Ashley stared at the coin, her composed facade finally cracking. A single tear tracked through the soot on her face as she reached out with a trembling hand to touch the coin. "They said you were all dead," General Cruz said gently. "Your unit was listed as KIA, full honors, buried at Arlington. How did you survive?" Ashley's voice, when she finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. "Tank, Phantom, and Reaper survived with me, the 3 dogs. We spent 6 days behind enemy lines, moving at night, hiding during the day. The dogs found water, warned me of patrols, even killed quietly when we had no choice. When we finally reached friendly forces, I was told the operation never happened. Ghost Pack never existed. I was given a choice: accept reassignment under a new identity with a sanitized service record, or face court-martial for discussing classified operations. So you became Sergeant Harper, dog handler, Edwards Air Force Base," the general concluded. "Hidden in plain sight. I just wanted to work with dogs again, sir. No operations, no classifications, no missions that didn't exist, just training and caring for military working dogs. And yet, when lives were on the line, you couldn't help but be who you really are," General Cruz observed. "A Ghost 7 doesn't stop being a Ghost 7 just because the paperwork says so." Colonel Blake had been standing in the corner, listening to the entire exchange with growing dismay. Everything he had believed about Ashley Harper had been wrong. She wasn't an underqualified support personnel playing at being important. She was an elite operator who'd seen and done things that most military personnel couldn't imagine. "General," Blake started, his voice uncertain, "I wasn't aware of Sergeant Harper's background when you publicly mocked her unit and questioned her competence," the general finished sharply. "When you ordered her to abandon personnel in mortal danger because you didn't think a dog handler could contribute to a rescue operation." Blake's silence was answer enough. General Cruz turned back to Ashley. "Sergeant Harper, or should I say Handler 7, you're faced with a choice. We can maintain your cover, continue the fiction that you're just another K9 handler, and pretend today never happened. Or we can acknowledge what everyone here has witnessed, that you're one of the most highly trained military assets on this base, and start utilizing your skills appropriately." Ashley looked at the 17 dogs arrayed around the room, then at the faces of the people she'd served alongside for 3 years. Some showed surprise, others recognition as pieces fell into place, but all showed respect. "Sir, these 17 dogs have proven themselves capable of far more than standard military working dog operations. With proper training and the right handler, they could become something special, something like Ghost Pack used to be." "Are you proposing to rebuild Ghost Pack?" the general asked. "I'm proposing that we stop wasting potential, sir. These dogs saved 23 lives today because they were allowed to use their full capabilities. How many more lives could they save if we stopped limiting them to traditional roles?" The general smiled slightly. "That sounds like something that would require specialized training, classified protocols, and a handler with unique qualifications." "Yes, sir, it would." "Then I'm authorizing the immediate establishment of a new K9 Special Operations training program at Edwards. You'll have full autonomy to develop training protocols, select personnel, and prepare these dogs for operations that require more than standard military working dog capabilities." He turned to Blake. "Colonel, you'll provide full support for this program. Any resources Sergeant Harper requires, any personnel she needs, any training facilities she requests. Is that clear?" Blake's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Yes, sir. Crystal clear." "Good." The general picked up the challenge coin and handed it to Ashley. "This belongs to you. Carry it as a reminder that sometimes the best warriors are the ones who choose to serve quietly until the moment their true skills are needed." Ashley accepted the coin with both hands, the gesture formal and meaningful. Around her, the 17 dogs remained perfectly still, but their alertness suggested they understood something significant had happened. "There's one more thing," General Cruz said, reaching into another pocket. "This came through channels this morning, before the explosion. It was being held pending verification of your identity. He handed her a sealed envelope marked with classification stamps. Ashley opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the brief message inside. Her face went pale, then flushed, then settled into an expression of grim determination. "What is it?" the general asked. Ashley looked up, her eyes showing a mixture of pain and hope. "It's from Handler 3, Marcus. He's alive, sir. He's been held in a Taliban prison for 3 years, but he's alive. Intelligence has located him, and they're planning an extraction." The room erupted in surprised exclamations. If Handler 3 had survived, it changed everything about the narrative of Operation Night Howl. It meant Ghostpack hadn't been completely destroyed. It meant there was still unfinished business in Afghanistan. "They want me to consult on the extraction planning," Ashley continued. "My knowledge of his operating patterns and the dogs he worked with could be crucial to a successful rescue." General Cruz nodded slowly. "Then it seems your quiet life as a dog handler is officially over, Sergeant Harper. Or should I start calling you Handler 7 again?" Before Ashley could respond, Max barked once, sharp and clear. The other 16 dogs immediately joined him, their voices rising in a chorus that echoed through the command center. It wasn't random barking. It was synchronized, purposeful, almost ceremonial. Noah Mitchell, who'd been standing near the door, spoke up. "That's the same sound they made during the rescue, when they were coordinating the evacuation." Ashley smiled slightly, the first genuine smile anyone at Edwards had seen from her. "They're voting, sir. They're saying they're ready for whatever comes next." "Then it's settled," General Cruz declared. "Ghostpack is officially reactivated, with Handler 7 commanding. Your first mission will be to prepare an operational assessment for the extraction of Handler 3. Your second will be to turn these 17 dogs into the most elite K9 unit the military has ever seen." He looked around the room at the assembled personnel. "Everything discussed here is classified. The existence of Ghostpack, Handler 7's identity, and the potential rescue mission are all need-to-know only. However, the heroism displayed today, the 23 lives saved, that story belongs to everyone." As people began to file out of the command center, each stopping to salute Ashley or nod respectfully to the dogs, Colonel Blake approached hesitantly. "Sergeant, Handler 7, he began awkwardly. "I owe you an apology. My behavior this morning was inexcusable." Ashley studied him for a moment, seeing not the arrogant colonel who'd mocked her unit, but a man confronting his own prejudices and limitations. "You couldn't have known, sir," she said simply. "That was the point of the cover identity." "But I should have recognized competence regardless of the package it came in," Blake replied. "I let my assumptions about support personnel cloud my judgment. Those assumptions could have cost 23 lives if you'd followed my orders." Max patted over to Blake, sitting directly in front of him and offering his paw. The gesture was so unexpected that Blake almost laughed, but he knelt and shook the dog's paw solemnly. "I think that means you were forgiven, sir," Ashley said. "A Max is an excellent judge of character, even when people aren't showing their best side." As Blake left, Rachel Morrison approached, her medical bag in hand. "I should check you for smoke inhalation and burns. That was prolonged exposure to dangerous conditions." "I'm fine, Lieutenant," Ashley replied, though she submitted to the examination. As Rachel checked her vitals, she spoke quietly. 3 years you've been here, and none of us knew. You must have felt so isolated, unable to be yourself, unable to use your real skills." Ashley thought about it for a moment. "Everyone wears masks, Lieutenant. Mine was just a little more elaborate than most. But these dogs, they always knew who I was. Dogs don't care about rank or reputation or service records. They care about the person holding the leash." "And now?" Rachel asked. "Now that everyone knows who you really are?" Ashley looked at the 17 dogs, who were finally relaxing from their alert positions, some even lying down on the cool floor of the command center. They'd been through hell today, literally running into fire because they trusted her judgment and she trusted their instincts. "Now we have work to do," she said. "Ghostpack wasn't just about elite operations. It was about proving that the bond between handler and dog could achieve things that neither could accomplish alone. These 17 dogs proved that today. They're ready for more." Samuel Wade, who'd been listening from nearby, stepped forward. "I've been handling military working dogs for 23 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened today. Would you be willing to teach me, to teach all of us, the techniques you used, the signals, the coordination?" Ashley nodded. Ghostpack was never meant to be just 7 handlers and their dogs. It was supposed to be a new doctrine for military K9 operations. What these dogs did today, any military working dog could potentially do with the right training. Then we'd better get started, Wade said with determination. If there's one thing today proved, it's that we've been underestimating our dogs' capabilities. The transformation of Edwards Air Force Base began that very afternoon. Word of the morning's rescue had spread through every unit, every department, and every corner of the installation. But it wasn't just the story of 23 lives saved that captured everyone's attention. It was the revelation that among them walked a ghost, a warrior from a unit that existed only in whispers and classified files that most would never see. Ashley stood in the K9 training grounds as the sun reached its peak, the California desert heat shimmering off the ground in waves. The 17 dogs were arranged before her in perfect formation, their earlier exhaustion replaced by the kind of focused attention that came from recognizing a turning point. These weren't just military working dogs anymore. They were candidates for something greater. From this moment forward, Ashley addressed them, though she knew the real audience was the group of handlers, trainers, and curious personnel who had gathered to watch. We operate under different parameters. Standard K9 training taught you obedience. What comes next will teach you to think. Master Sergeant Samuel Wade stood among the observers, his notebook out and ready. In his 23 years of service, he'd thought he knew everything about military dog training. The morning's events had shattered that assumption completely. Ashley gave a hand signal so subtle that Wade almost missed it. Max immediately broke from formation, not in a straight line, but in a complex pattern that took him behind and around the other dogs. 3 seconds later, he was back in position, but the entire pack formation had shifted. What had been a straight line was now a tactical wedge, with overlapping fields of view and mutual support positions. How did they all know to move? Wade asked, unable to contain his curiosity. You only signaled Max. Because Max signaled them, Ashley replied, not taking her eyes off the dogs. In Ghost Pack protocols, every dog is both follower and leader. They communicate through micro-movements, body positioning, even breathing patterns. What takes human soldiers weeks to learn in formation drills, dogs can master in days because they're naturally pack animals. She demonstrated with another signal, this time directed at Rex, the German shepherd who had independently entered the burning hangar. Rex barked once, a specific tone and duration. Immediately, the formation split into 3 groups of 5 or 6 dogs each, spreading out in what military tacticians would recognize as a classic flanking maneuver. Lieutenant Rachel Morrison had arrived with her medical equipment, ostensibly to check the dogs for any delayed effects from smoke inhalation. But, like everyone else, she found herself mesmerized by the display of coordinated intelligence. "This is what you did in Afghanistan," she said. It wasn't a question. Ashley nodded slowly. In urban combat, enemies often hide in places where human soldiers can't go without extreme risk. Narrow alleys, collapsed buildings, tunnel systems. But dogs can navigate those spaces, and with the right training, they can do more than just detect threats. They can map layouts, identify numbers of opponents, even distinguish between combatants and civilians by scent markers like gun oil or explosive residue. Colonel Blake arrived at the training ground, his presence causing a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The morning's humiliation still hung between them, but he had exchanged his flight suit for standard duty uniform, a subtle acknowledgement that this was no longer about pilot versus support personnel. "General Cruz wants a demonstration," he said without preamble. "Tomorrow at 0800 hours. Joint Chiefs are flying in from the Pentagon. They want to see if Ghost Pack protocols can be replicated or if they were unique to the original unit." Ashley felt the weight of that statement. The original Ghost Pack had taken 2 years to train, with resources and support that no longer existed. She had less than 24 hours to prove that these 17 dogs could be the foundation of something similar. "We'll be ready, sir," she said simply. Blake hesitated, then added, "The general also authorized me to provide whatever resources you need. Personnel, equipment, training aids. Just tell me what you require." It was a complete reversal from the morning's dismissive attitude, and everyone present recognized the significance. Ashley considered for a moment, then made a decision that surprised everyone. "I need pilots, sir." Blake's eyebrows rose. Pilots? The biggest challenge in combat K9 operations is coordination with air support. Dogs can hear aircraft long before humans, but they don't naturally understand the relationship between air support and ground operations. If we can teach them to recognize and respond to specific aircraft sounds, to understand that certain engine noises mean support, while others mean threat, we could revolutionize how K9 units operate in combat zones. Blake processed this, his tactical mind immediately grasping the implications. You want to teach dogs to coordinate with close air support? I want to teach them to be forward air controllers, sir. They're already on the ground, already tracking threats. If they can indicate target locations in ways pilots can recognize and respond to, we could reduce civilian casualties and increase precision in urban combat situations. The colonel who had mocked dog handlers that morning found himself genuinely impressed by the tactical innovation. I'll have 3 pilots here within the hour. What else? I need access to the base's tactical simulation center, the medical training mannequins, and every piece of surplus equipment from the last 3 deployment rotations. Done, Blake said immediately, pulling out his phone to begin making arrangements. As he walked away, already deep in conversation with someone in logistics, Noah Mitchell approached Ashley. The pilot who had first recognized her from the Kandahar operation had been watching the entire training session with intense interest. You saved my unit 3 years ago, he said quietly. 8 of us were trapped in a compound surrounded by Taliban fighters. Air support couldn't identify our location because we'd lost communications. Then these dogs appeared out of nowhere, moving through the firefight like they were invisible. They led us out through a route we didn't even know existed. Ashley remembered that night. It had been one of Ghost Pack's last successful operations before Night Howl. Tank was the lead dog on that mission. He could navigate in complete darkness, using just scent trails and sound mapping. Tank, Noah repeated. You said he was one of the 3 who survived with you. Where is he now? Ashley's expression darkened. Retired. The trauma from Night Howl left him unable to work. He lives with a family in Colorado now, far from anything that might trigger his memories. Phantom and Reaper are the same. What we went through, what they saw, some things can't be untrained. Noah understood. He'd seen plenty of warriors, both human and canine, broken by the weight of what they'd experienced. But you're still here. Someone has to remember, Ashley said simply. Someone has to carry forward what Ghost Pack learned, what we proved was possible. These 17 dogs deserve the chance to be more than what conventional training allows. The afternoon sun was brutal as Ashley led the dogs through increasingly complex exercises. She had divided them into 3 teams, each with a specific role that played to their natural strengths. The Malinois team, led by Max, focused on assault and breach techniques. The German Shepherds, with Rex as their leader, worked on detection and tracking. The mixed breed team, including 2 Labrador Retrievers and a Dutch Shepherd, learned medical support and evacuation procedures. What fascinated the growing crowd of observers was how quickly the dogs adapted to new concepts. Within 2 hours, they were executing maneuvers that should have taken weeks to master. But Ashley knew it wasn't just about the dog's intelligence. It was about trust. These 17 animals had followed her into fire that morning because they trusted her judgment absolutely. That trust was the foundation everything else built upon. Sergeant Harper, a voice called from behind the crowd. Everyone turned to see General Cruz returning, but this time he wasn't alone. 3 people in civilian clothes accompanied him, their bearing and alertness marking them as something other than typical government bureaucrats. Ashley recognized the type immediately. Intelligence officers, probably CIA or DIA, the kind of people who had debriefed her after Night Howl and made her disappear into a cover identity. We need to speak privately, the general said. His tone was neutral, but Ashley could read the tension in his posture. They moved to a secure conference room in the base command center, leaving the dogs under Wade's supervision. Once the door was closed and secured, one of the civilians, a woman with prematurely gray hair and sharp brown eyes, placed a tablet on the table. Handler 7, she began without preamble. I'm Director Sarah Collins, Defense Intelligence Agency. We need to discuss Handler 3 and the intelligence we've received about his location. The tablet displayed satellite imagery of a compound in Afghanistan's Helmand province. Ashley recognized the terrain immediately. It was less than 50 miles from where Operation Night Howl had gone wrong. Marcus is being held here, Collins continued, zooming in on a specific building. We've confirmed through local assets that he's alive but in deteriorating condition. The Taliban group holding him doesn't know his true identity. They think he's just another American soldier, valuable for propaganda but not critical enough to warrant special security. How did he survive? Ashley asked, her voice carefully controlled. I saw him go down. The explosion, the gunfire. There was no way out. He was captured, not killed, Collins explained. Spent 6 months in a field hospital recovering from his injuries, then was moved between various detention sites. We only identified him 2 weeks ago through facial recognition from a propaganda video. He's lost significant weight and appears to have sustained permanent injuries to his left leg, but he's alive. General Cruz leaned forward. The extraction window is narrow. Our intelligence suggests he'll be moved again within the next 10 days, possibly to a location we can't reach. We need to act fast, but conventional special operations would likely result in his death. The moment they realize we're coming for him specifically, they'll kill him rather than let us succeed. Ashley studied the compound layout, her mind already working through tactical scenarios. You need a distraction, something that draws their attention while the real extraction happens. We need ghost pack protocols, Collins said directly. Dogs that can infiltrate ahead of human forces, create chaos and confusion, and identify Marcus without alerting his captors to his significance. My original dogs are retired and broken, Ashley stated. These 17 are good, but they've had less than a day of advanced training. Which is why we're not sending them, Cruz replied. We're sending you, as an advisor to the SEAL team conducting the extraction. Your knowledge of Marcus's operating patterns, his signals, the ways he would try to communicate if he knew rescue was coming, that could make the difference between success and failure. Ashley felt the familiar weight of an impossible decision. She had spent 3 years hiding from exactly this kind of mission, the kind where everything could go wrong in an instant, and people died because of decisions made in fractions of seconds. There's more, Collins added. She pulled up another image, this one a grainy photo from a Taliban propaganda site. Look at his hands. Ashley looked closer and felt her breath catch. Marcus was making a hand signal, subtle enough that his captors wouldn't notice, but distinctive enough for anyone who knew Ghost Pack protocols to recognize. It was the signal for 7, repeated 3 times. He knows you're alive, Collins said. Somehow he knows you survived, and he's trying to send you a message. The room fell silent as Ashley processed this information. For 3 years, she'd believed she was the only survivor of Ghost Pack. The guilt of that survival had haunted her every day. Now, discovering Marcus was alive but imprisoned, possibly being tortured, waiting for a rescue that might never come. When? She asked simply. Wheels up in 72 hours, Cruz replied. That gives you 3 days to prepare these dogs to operate without you and to brief the SEAL team on Ghost Pack protocols they can use in the field. 3 days, Ashley repeated. You're asking me to compress years of training into 3 days. We're asking you to do what you did this morning, Cruz countered. The impossible. Ashley stood and moved to the window, looking out at the training grounds where Wade was running the 17 dogs through basic exercises. They were good dogs, talented and brave, but Ghost Pack had been more than that. It had been a fusion of human and canine capabilities that transcended normal military operations. I'll need complete autonomy, she said finally. No interference, no second guessing, no traditional training protocols. If I'm going to prepare these dogs and brief a SEAL team in 3 days, I need to do things that will seem insane to anyone watching. Done, Cruz said immediately, and I need to select my own support team, people who can continue the training while I'm deployed. Anyone on base is at your disposal. Ashley turned from the window. Then I'll do it. But understand something. Ghost Pack protocols aren't just about training dogs. They're about fundamentally changing how we think about the animal-human partnership in combat. What you're going to see over the next 3 days will challenge everything you think you know about what's possible. Collins stood, gathering her equipment. Handler 7, I was part of the committee that disbanded Ghost Pack after Night Howl. We thought the program was too unconventional, too dependent on specific personalities rather than reproducible systems. Watching what you did this morning, I realized we were wrong. Ghost Pack wasn't about the dogs or the handlers separately. It was about what happened when the right handlers found the right dogs and were given permission to explore the full potential of that partnership. She paused at the door. Well, Marcus was my friend. Bring him home. After the intelligence officers left, Ashley and General Cruz returned to the training grounds, where a remarkable scene was unfolding. The 17 dogs had stopped their formal exercises and were sitting in a circle around Master Sergeant Wade, who was on his knees in the center, clearly frustrated. I've done exactly what you showed me, Wade was saying to Max. The hand signal, the whistle pattern, everything. Why won't you respond? Max tilted his head, looked at Wade for a long moment, then deliberately turned to look at Ashley. The other 16 dogs did the same, their message clear. Wade might have the technical movements correct, but he wasn't their handler. He hadn't earned their trust in fire. Ashley approached the circle, and immediately all 17 dogs shifted their attention to her. Their posture changed, becoming more alert, more ready. Wade saw it and understood. "They only work for you," he said, not accusingly, but with professional interest. "Even though I'm doing exactly what you did, they won't accept commands from me." "That's the first lesson of Ghost Pack protocols," Ashley explained. "It's not about commands, it's about communication. These dogs aren't following orders, they're participating in a conversation. Watch." She made a subtle gesture with her left hand, while shifting her weight slightly to her right foot. Max immediately stood and moved to Rex, touching his nose to the German Shepherd's ear. Rex then barked twice, specific tones, and the entire pack reformed into 3 distinct groups without any additional input from Ashley. "You didn't command them to do that," Wade observed. "You suggested something to Max and they worked out the rest among themselves." Exactly. Ghost Pack protocols recognize that dogs have their own communication system that's far more sophisticated than we usually credit. Instead of overriding that system with human commands, we integrate with it. We become part of the pack conversation rather than dictators telling them what to do. Blake had returned with the 3 pilots he'd promised, and they were watching with fascination. One of them, Captain Lisa Chen, stepped forward. "Could you teach them to recognize our specific aircraft? To understand that when they hear our engines, help is coming?" Ashley studied the pilot, noting the genuine interest rather than the skepticism in her expression. "Better than that, Captain. I can teach them to guide you to targets." Over the next 3 hours, Ashley demonstrated techniques that seemed to border on the impossible. She taught Max to recognize the sound difference between an F-22 and an F-16 from recordings, then to indicate which aircraft was approaching based on engine noise alone. She showed Rex how to use a laser pointer attached to his vest to designate targets for air support. She trained the 2 Labradors to drag wounded mannequins to specific colored smoke markers that would indicate medical evacuation points to incoming helicopters. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the training ground, the crowd of observers had grown to include personnel from every part of the base. Word had spread that something extraordinary was happening at the K9 compound, something that challenged conventional understanding of what military working dogs could achieve. Noah Mitchell had been watching all afternoon, but as the formal training ended, he approached Ashley with a question that had been bothering him. "In Kandahar, when your dogs found us, they didn't just lead us out. One of them, a German Shepherd with a scarred ear, actually disarmed an IED along our escape route. I watched him carefully move wires with his teeth, like he understood exactly what would happen if he made a mistake." "How is that possible?" Ashley's expression grew distant, remembering. That was Phantom. He'd watched explosive ordnance disposal teams work so many times that he learned to recognize the patterns. Not just what bombs looked like, but how they were constructed, where the trigger mechanisms were typically placed. He couldn't disarm complex devices, but simple pressure plates and tripwires? He understood those well enough to neutralize them when necessary. "You're telling me a dog taught himself bomb disposal by observation? I'm telling you that dogs are capable of learning far more than we typically allow them to. We limit them with our assumptions about their intelligence." Ghost Pack removed those limitations. As darkness fell over Edwards Air Force Base, Ashley stood alone with the 17 dogs in the empty training ground. Tomorrow would bring the Pentagon observers, the formal demonstration that would determine whether Ghost Pack protocols would be adopted or dismissed as an anomaly. In 3 days, she would leave for Afghanistan to help rescue Marcus, not knowing if she would return. But tonight, she had this moment with 17 Daewoo who had proven themselves capable of extraordinary things. Max approached and sat beside her, leaning slightly against her leg in a gesture of companionship that transcended the military working relationship. "You did good today," she told him quietly. "All of you did." Max responded with a soft whine that the others picked up, creating a low chorus that seemed to harmonize with the desert wind. It was their way of saying they were ready for whatever came next. The next morning arrived with the kind of crystal clarity that only desert environments could produce. By 0730 hours, the demonstration area had been prepared with obstacles, smoke machines, hidden mannequins representing casualties, and electronic devices that would simulate various combat scenarios. The audience was unlike anything Edwards Air Force Base had ever seen, 3 generals, 2 admirals, a representative from the Secretary of Defense's office, and dozens of military intelligence and special operations personnel had arrived during the night. They sat in temporary bleachers that had been erected specifically for this event, their expressions ranging from skeptical to intensely curious. Ashley stood before them in a fresh uniform, the 17 dogs arranged behind her in perfect formation. She'd spent most of the night preparing, not just the practical elements of the demonstration, but mentally preparing herself for the scrutiny that was about to come. General Cruz made the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to witness is a demonstration of advanced K9 capabilities developed under the Ghost Pack protocols. These techniques were thought lost when the original unit was disbanded. Sergeant Harper, or, as she was previously known, Handler 7, will show you that not only can these protocols be recovered, but they can be taught to standard military working dogs in a remarkably short time. An admiral in the front row, his chest heavy with decorations from 40 years of service, spoke up. Sergeant, I've reviewed what records exist of the original Ghost Pack. They suggest capabilities that border on the fantastical. Dogs operating independently behind enemy lines, conducting reconnaissance that rivals human special operations, even making tactical decisions without handler input. Surely these are exaggerations. Ashley met his gaze steadily. With respect, Admiral, they are understatements. Ghost Pack achieved things that were never officially documented because they were deemed too sensitive or too unbelievable for official reports. Today, with 17 dogs who've had less than 24 hours of advanced training, I'll show you a fraction of what's possible. She turned to the dogs and gave a single whistle, low and short. Immediately, they dispersed into the demonstration area, each moving with purpose toward different objectives. What followed over the next hour defied every expectation the observers had brought with them. Max led a team of 5 dogs in what could only be described as a coordinated assault on a simulated enemy position. They didn't just charge forward. They used cover, provided overwatch for each other, and even performed what looked like suppressive positioning while others advanced. When they encountered a mannequin rigged with a simulated explosive vest, Rex carefully used his teeth to disconnect wires in the correct sequence, a behavior he'd learned just the night before. The 2 Labradors demonstrated medical evacuation procedures, dragging wounded mannequins not just to safety, but to specific zones they'd marked with different colored indicators: red for critical, yellow for urgent, green for stable. They even performed basic triage, spending more time positioning the critical casualties for easy access, while moving the stable ones to covered positions. But the moment that caused several generals to actually stand up in amazement came when Ashley demonstrated air-ground coordination. Captain Chen flew her F-16 over the demonstration area while the dogs were searching a simulated building complex for hidden targets. Without any human direction, Rex activated the laser designator on his vest and painted a target on a building where mannequins representing enemy combatants were hidden. The laser remained steady on target for the full 15 seconds required for a precision strike, despite simulated gunfire and explosions going off around the dog. How does he know to hold it steady for exactly 15 seconds? The Secretary of Defense's representative asked. Because that's how long pilots need for target acquisition and weapon release, Ashley explained. He learned the timing through repetition and positive reinforcement, but more importantly, he understands the purpose. He knows that holding that laser steady means the threat gets eliminated and his pack stays safe. The demonstration continued with increasingly complex scenarios. The dogs showed they could distinguish between civilian and combatant mannequins by scent markers, could map building interiors and communicate the layout through specific bark patterns, and could even perform coordinated distractions while other team members completed objectives. As the formal demonstration ended, the audience sat in stunned silence. Finally, the admiral who'd expressed initial skepticism stood and addressed Ashley directly. Sergeant Harper, I've been in the military for 4 decades. I've seen technology change the battlefield in ways we never imagined. But what you've shown us today might be the most significant advancement in ground combat capabilities I've ever witnessed. These aren't just military working dogs anymore. They're partners. Thinking, adapting, problem-solving partners. General Cruz stood to address the assembled officials. The question before us is whether we're prepared to embrace this evolution. Ghost Pack protocols challenge our fundamental assumptions about animal intelligence and capability. They require us to think of military working dogs not as tools, but as team members with their own specialties and decision-making abilities. A heated discussion followed, with traditional military thinkers arguing against what they saw as anthropomorphizing animals, while others recognized the undeniable tactical advantages of what they'd witnessed. Through it all, Ashley stood quietly with the 17 dogs, who had returned to formation without being called, sitting perfectly still as their future was debated. Finally, the representative from the Secretary of Defense stood. "Sergeant Harper, if we authorize expansion of this program, how many dogs could be trained to this level?" Ashley considered carefully. "That depends on several factors, sir. Not every dog has the cognitive flexibility required for Ghost Pack protocols. Not every handler can adapt to seeing dogs as partners rather than subordinates. But, conservatively, within a year, we could have 50 operational K9 teams at this level. Within 5 years, this could be standard for all military working dog units. And the handlers? Can you train others to do what you do?" "I've already started, sir." Ashley gestured to where Wade, Noah, Rachel, and several other personnel who'd been observing the training stood. "The key is selecting people who can set aside their preconceptions about animal limitations. People who can learn to read dogs as well as dogs read us." The officials withdrew for private deliberation, leaving Ashley and the dogs waiting in the demonstration area. Max sensed her tension and pressed closer, offering silent support. The other dogs remained alert but calm, as if they understood the significance of what was happening. 30 minutes later, General Cruz returned with the verdict. "The Secretary of Defense has authorized immediate expansion of the Ghost Pack program. You'll have full resources, dedicated facilities, and authority to select personnel from any branch of service. Your first priority is to prepare a team for the extraction mission. Your second is to establish a training pipeline that can be replicated at other installations." Ashley felt a wave of relief and responsibility wash over her. Ghost Pack would live again, not as a secret unit operating in shadows, but as an acknowledged evolution in military capability. "There's one more thing," Cruz added. "Your rank doesn't reflect your actual position and expertise. Effective immediately, you're promoted to Master Sergeant, with a warrant officer package being fast-tracked. Ghost Pack needs a leader with the authority to make decisions without constantly seeking approval from those who don't understand the capabilities involved." The announcement caused a stir among the watching personnel. Jumping from sergeant to Master Sergeant was unusual enough, but the mention of a warrant officer package suggested the military was creating an entirely new position category for what Ashley represented. Blake approached as the crowd began to disperse. His expression was complex, mixing professional respect with personal humility. "Master Sergeant Harper, I owe you more than an apology. This morning I represented everything wrong with how we evaluate capability in the military. I looked at surface qualifications instead of actual ability. Those 23 people are alive because you ignored my orders. This program exists because you refused to accept limitations that I tried to impose." Ashley studied him for a moment. "Colonel, you reacted based on the information available to you. My cover identity was specifically designed to seem unremarkable. You couldn't have known what you were really looking at. But I should have recognized competence when it acted," Blake countered. "When those dogs refused to evacuate, when you read their behavior and understood something the rest of us couldn't, I should have trusted that instead of falling back on rank and conventional thinking." Max walked over to Blake and sat directly in front of him, looking up with an expression that seemed almost amused. The colonel knelt and offered his hand, which Max sniffed before giving it a single lick. "I think that means we're good," Ashley said with a slight smile. "Max doesn't hold grudges. It's one of the things that makes dogs better partners than humans sometimes." Over the next 2 days, Edwards Air Force Base transformed into the nexus of a revolution in military working dog operations. Handlers from other installations arrived for crash courses in basic Ghost Pack protocols. Intelligence officers studied videos of the demonstrations, identifying applications for various combat scenarios. Engineers began designing equipment specifically for dogs operating at this new level of capability. Ashley worked 18-hour days, teaching, demonstrating, and documenting everything she could before her deployment. She established a training hierarchy with Wade as her second-in-command, supported by Noah, Rachel, and 6 other personnel who'd shown particular aptitude for understanding the animal-human partnership dynamics. On the night before her departure for Afghanistan, Ashley sat in the K9 compound with the 17 dogs. They seemed to understand she was leaving. Max was particularly clingy, staying within touching distance at all times. The others arranged themselves in a protective circle around her, their usual playfulness replaced by solemn attention. "I'll be back," she told them, though she knew promises like that were dangerous in her line of work. "Wade will continue your training. You'll keep learning, keep growing, and when I return, we'll show the world what GhostPak can really do." Rex approached with something in his mouth. It was a challenge coin, one that must have fallen from someone's pocket during the demonstrations. But as Ashley looked closer, she realized it wasn't just any coin. It was the one General Cruz had given her, the Ghost 7 coin from the SEAL team leader in Kandahar. Somehow Rex had retrieved it from her quarters and brought it to her. "You want me to take it with me?" she said, understanding. "For luck." The dog's tail wagged once, a brief movement that confirmed her interpretation. She took the coin and tucked it into her pocket, feeling its weight as a reminder of what she was fighting to preserve and rebuild. Noah arrived to drive her to the airfield where a military transport waited. "The SEALs you're briefing are some of the best we have," he said as they drove through the darkness. "But they've never worked with anyone like you or tactics like GhostPak developed." "They don't need to become GhostPak," Ashley replied. "They just need to understand that the battlefield has dimensions they haven't considered. That information can come from sources they've been trained to overlook. Marcus is alive because he understood that. Now, I need to help them understand it too." At the airfield, General Cruz was waiting with Director Collins and a SEAL team commander whose name wasn't provided. Security for the mission was so tight that even names were being compartmentalized. "Handler 7, the SEAL commander said, using her GhostPak designation rather than her current rank. "My team has reviewed everything available on the original GhostPak operations. We're prepared to integrate your tactical recommendations, no matter how unconventional they might seem." Ashley appreciated his directness. "Commander, what I'm going to suggest will seem insane at times. Using stray dogs as reconnaissance assets, reading animal behavior patterns to identify enemy positions, following routes that animals use rather than human tactical approaches. Your men will need to trust instincts they've been trained to suppress. If it gets Handler 3 home alive, we'll follow a rabbit down its hole," the commander replied. The aircraft engines roared to life, and Ashley took one last look at Edwards Air Force Base. Somewhere in the K9 compound, 17 dogs were probably looking toward the sky, listening to the sound of her departure. In 72 hours, she'd either return with Marcus or not at all. But either way, GhostPak would continue. The morning's fire had rekindled something that 3 years of hiding hadn't extinguished. The flight to Afghanistan took 14 hours, with a stop at a forward base in Germany. During the flight, Ashley briefed the SEAL team on every detail she could remember about Marcus's operating patterns, his preferred signals, the ways he would try to communicate if he knew rescue was coming. She taught them basic GhostPak hand signals, the ones that Marcus would recognize even after 3 years of captivity. As they flew over the mountains of Afghanistan, Ashley found herself thinking about that last mission, Operation Night Howl. They'd been so confident, so certain that their combination of human intelligence and animal instinct was unbeatable. The ambush had proved them wrong, but not about the concept, only about their preparedness for betrayal from within their own ranks. "Handler 7, the commander said quietly, sitting down beside her. "I need to know something. The official report says the entire GhostPak was killed. You were listed as KIA along with the others. How did you survive when the rest of your unit didn't?" Ashley stared out the window at the harsh landscape below. "We were betrayed. Someone leaked our position to the Taliban. When the ambush came, it was designed specifically to counter GhostPak tactics. They knew to target the dogs first, to separate handlers from their animals. In the chaos, Marcus and I were pushed away from the main unit. I saw him go down, thought he was dead. Tank, Phantom, and Reaper found me in the mountains. We spent 6 days evading capture, moving only at night, trusting the dog's senses over any technology. And you never tried to find out who betrayed you? Every day for 3 years I've wondered, but digging into it would have exposed that I survived, and that would have put targets on the backs of everyone who helped me disappear. Sometimes the price of truth is higher than the value of justice." The compound in Helmand Province looked exactly as it had in the satellite imagery, a collection of mud brick buildings surrounded by walls that had stood for centuries. The SEAL team observed from a concealed position 2 kilometers away, while Ashley studied the terrain through specialized optics. "There," she said quietly, pointing to a section of the eastern wall. "See those dogs lying in the shade? They're not random strays. They're positioned as sentries. The Taliban learned from fighting against Ghost Pack. They use dogs as early warning systems now." The commander processed this information. "Can you counter them?" Ashley smiled grimly. "Counter them? Commander, I'm going to recruit them." What followed was 48 hours of the most unconventional special operations preparation anyone on the team had witnessed. Ashley didn't focus on the compound itself, but on the animals living around it. She identified patterns in how the local dogs moved, which ones were actually guards versus scavengers, and most importantly, which ones showed signs of previous military training. "That German Shepherd mix," she told the team, pointing to a scarred dog that stayed close to the building where Marcus was believed to be held. "Look at his ear position when vehicles approach. He's been trained, probably captured from an Afghan National Army unit. He's not loyal to the Taliban. He's just surviving." On the second night, Ashley did something that made even the seasoned SEALs nervous. She left their observation position alone, moving through the darkness toward the compound. But she didn't approach directly. Instead, she circled wide, leaving small caches of food mixed with specific scents at strategic points. She was laying a trail, but not for humans. By dawn, 3 of the compound's dogs had found and followed her scent trail away from their positions. She met them in a wadi 500 meters from the compound walls. What happened next would have seemed like magic to anyone not familiar with Ghost Pack protocols. Using a combination of hand signals, body language, and controlled breathing patterns, she communicated with the dogs. Not commands, but negotiations. An exchange of information between species that transcended conventional understanding. She returned to the SEAL position with critical intelligence. "Marcus is in the northwestern building, 2nd floor. He's injured but mobile. There are 17 guards, but only 6 are alert at any given time. The others are using hashish. The dogs told me." The SEAL commander stared at her. "The dogs told you?" Dogs can distinguish between individual human scents. These 3 have been in that compound for months. They know every person there. I showed them a cloth with Marcus's scent from his personal effects. They indicated which building that scent was strongest in. They also showed me which guards they avoid versus which ones they approach for food. The violent ones versus the lazy ones. "You're telling me you got a tactical intelligence assessment from stray dogs?" "I'm telling you that animals are constantly gathering information we ignore. Ghost Pack protocols just taught us how to access it." The rescue operation launched at 3 a.m. local time, but it didn't begin with the SEALs. It began with the 3 dogs Ashley had recruited. They returned to the compound but didn't resume their guard positions. Instead, following patterns Ashley had shown them, they created systematic disruptions. One knocked over a fuel barrel. Another started a fight with the guard dogs on the opposite side of the compound from Marcus's location. The third, the German Shepherd mix, did something extraordinary. He went to Marcus's building and barked 3 times in a specific pattern. Ghost Pack's old signal for "friendlies incoming." Inside his cell, Marcus heard the signal and felt his heart race for the first time in 3 years. He dragged himself to the window, his damaged leg screaming in protest. In the courtyard below, he saw the German Shepherd looking directly at him. The dog raised one paw and held it for exactly 3 seconds. Handler 7's personal recognition signal. Marcus knew then that Ashley was alive, and that rescue was imminent. Using what little strength he had, he began preparing, creating noise on the opposite side of his cell, to draw his guards' attention away from the direction he knew the assault would come from. The SEAL team's entrance was swift and precise. With the guards distracted by the chaos the dogs had created, and Marcus actively misdirecting attention from inside, they reached his cell in less than 90 seconds. The moment the door breached, Marcus called out the Ghost Pack authentication code, identifying himself as a friendly despite his drastically changed appearance. They carried him out through a route the German Shepherd mix actually led them through, the dog having identified the path with the fewest guards. As they reached the extraction point, Marcus saw a figure in tactical gear waiting by the helicopter. Even with the night vision goggles and full combat kit, he recognized the way she stood, the way she held her weapon. "7," he called out, his voice broken by years of captivity. Ashley turned, pulling off her goggles. "3, took you long enough to signal your position." Despite everything, Marcus actually laughed. "You always were impatient." As the helicopter lifted off, the German Shepherd mix stood at the compound's edge, watching them go. Ashley had offered to bring him, but he had chosen to stay, to continue the work of disruption from within. Some warriors found their battlefield in unexpected places. The flight back to the forward operating base was quiet, except for the medical team working on Marcus. His injuries were extensive but survivable. More importantly, his mind was intact. 3 years of captivity hadn't broken the Ghost Pack handler within. "They told me you were all dead," he said to Ashley once the medics had stabilized him. "They showed me photos of the ambush site, dog tags, everything." "They told me the same about you," Ashley replied. "We were supposed to die that night. Someone wanted Ghost Pack erased." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know who. I've had 3 years to piece it together. The patterns, the timing, the specific tactics they used against us. It was Colonel Harrison, our own operational commander." Ashley felt something cold settle in her chest. Harrison had been the one who'd recruited her for Ghost Pack, who'd championed the program to skeptical superiors. Why? Money. The Taliban offered him $50 million for Ghost Pack's elimination. We were too effective. We were disrupting their operations faster than they could adapt. So, they bought the one thing they couldn't defeat: betrayal from within. The revelation hung between them, heavy with implications. Their unit hadn't failed. They'd been sold out by the very person supposed to protect them. "Harrison needs to pay," Marcus said quietly. "He will," Ashley replied, "but not through revenge, through resurrection. Every Ghost Pack team we train, every life they save, every mission they complete proves that what he tried to destroy was bigger than his betrayal. He killed 7 handlers and 28 dogs, but he didn't kill the idea." As the helicopter approached the base, Ashley could see lights blazing on the runway, medical teams standing ready, and surprisingly, a video link screen showing Edwards Air Force Base. On the screen, 17 dogs sat in perfect formation, with Wade standing beside them. "They insisted on waiting," Wade's voice came through the communication system. "Haven't moved from formation for 6 hours. Somehow they knew you were coming back." Max barked once through the video link, and Ashley heard Marcus gasp beside her. "That sounds like Tank's command bark," he said. "The exact same tone and duration." "Max learned from the videos we had of Tank," Ashley explained. "These 17 dogs are carrying forward what the original Ghost Pack started. They're not replacements. They're the next evolution." The helicopter touched down, and as medical teams rushed to get Marcus to the hospital, Ashley stood on the tarmac looking at the mountains of Afghanistan one last time. She'd come here to rescue one man, but in doing so, she'd closed a chapter that had haunted her for 3 years. Back at Edwards 2 days later, the K9 compound had become a pilgrimage site of sorts. Military personnel from across the base came to see the 17 dogs who'd saved 23 lives and sparked a revolution in military working dog operations. But more importantly, they came to understand that they'd been wrong about the limits of what was possible. Marcus, despite his injuries, insisted on meeting the dogs. He was wheeled into the training ground where all 17 sat waiting. Max approached first, moving slowly and carefully, aware that this human was injured. He sat directly in front of Marcus's wheelchair and offered his paw. "He knows you're 3, Ashley explained. "I showed them videos of the original Ghost Pack. They know our history." Marcus shook the dog's paw solemnly, then looked up at Ashley with tears in his eyes. "They're not trying to replace our dogs. They're honoring them." One by one, each of the 17 dogs approached Marcus, offering their own greeting. By the end, he was surrounded by a new pack, one that had chosen to carry forward a legacy they had never directly experienced but somehow understood. General Cruz arrived with news that would reshape military operations for decades to come. The Joint Chiefs have approved full implementation of Ghost Pack protocols across all branches. Within 5 years, every military working dog unit will have handlers trained in these methods. Handler 7, you're being asked to lead this transformation. Ashley looked at the 17 dogs, at Marcus in his wheelchair but alive, at the crowd of personnel who had stopped seeing dogs as equipment and started seeing them as partners. "Sir, I'll do it on one condition. This isn't just about training dogs differently. It's about changing how we think about partnership, capability, and the nature of intelligence itself. I need complete autonomy to challenge every assumption, break every traditional barrier, and prove that the partnership between human and animal can achieve things neither could accomplish alone." "Done," Cruz said immediately. "Whatever you need." That evening, as the sun set over the California desert, Ashley stood in the K9 compound with Marcus beside her in his wheelchair and 17 dogs arranged around them. Wade, Noah, Rachel, Blake, and dozens of others who had witnessed the transformation stood watching. Ghost Pack was never about the 7 handlers or the 28 dogs who officially comprised the unit, Ashley addressed them. It was about proving that when we stop imposing our limitations on other species, when we learn to communicate rather than just command, we discover capabilities we never imagined possible. She looked at Max, who stood at perfect attention, his scarred gute testament to his run through fire. These 17 dogs didn't just save 23 lives, they saved an idea. They proved that Ghost Pack wasn't a fluke or an anomaly. It was a glimpse of what's possible when we're brave enough to see animals as partners rather than tools. Marcus spoke up, his voice still weak but clear. 3 years ago, Handler 7 and I watched our unit die because someone believed Ghost Pack was too dangerous to exist. Today, I'm watching it be reborn stronger than before. Not as a secret unit operating in shadows, but as a transformation in how the entire military approaches the animal-human partnership. As if understanding the moment's significance, Max barked once. The other 16 dogs joined him, their voices creating a chorus that echoed across the base. It wasn't random noise. It was synchronized, purposeful, almost ceremonial. It was Ghost Pack's traditional end-of-mission signal, learned from videos and taught by Ashley, but made their own through the courage they'd shown running into fire. The crowd began to disperse as darkness fell, but Ashley remained with Marcus and the dogs. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new training, new doubts to overcome. But tonight, she allowed herself this moment of victory. "You know there's something else," Marcus said quietly. In the compound, I heard guards talking. Harrison is still alive. He's working as a military contractor in Syria, protected by the money he earned from our betrayal. Ashley's expression didn't change, but Max and several other dogs shifted positions slightly, responding to a tension in her body language that was invisible to human observation. "He thinks Ghost Pack is dead," Marcus continued. "He has no idea what happened today, what you've built here." "Good," Ashley said simply. "Let him think that. Let him believe he won. Because one day, when Ghost Pack teams are operating in every theater, when what he tried to destroy has become standard military doctrine, he'll realize that betrayal couldn't kill an idea whose time had come." Max patted over and leaned against her leg, offering silent support. The other dogs maintained their positions, but their alertness suggested they understood something significant was being discussed. "For now, we focus on building," Ashley continued. "Training handlers, developing protocols, proving repeatedly that this works. Harrison's judgment will come, not from us, but from the weight of history, proving him wrong." As they prepared to leave the training ground, Ashley's satellite phone buzzed with an incoming message. She read it, and her expression shifted to something Marcus recognized from their operational days. "What is it?" he asked. She showed him the message. "Handler 7, we've detected unusual dog pack behavior in 3 conflict zones that matches Ghost Pack patterns. Possible other survivors. Investigation authorized. Director Collins." Marcus's eyes widened. "You think others from our unit survived?" "I think Ghost Pack was bigger than any of us realized," Ashley replied. 7 handlers and 28 dogs were the official count. But how many unofficial teams were trained? How many learned our methods and disappeared into their own shadow operations when the unit was disbanded? The implications were staggering. Ghost Pack might not have died that night in Afghanistan. It might have scattered, gone underground, continued operating in ways and places they had never imagined. Ashley looked at the 17 dogs who'd started this resurrection. "Tomorrow, we start preparing for the possibility that we're not rebuilding Ghost Pack from scratch. We might be gathering scattered pieces that have been operating independently, waiting for the signal to reunite." Max barked again, and this time it was picked up not just by the 16 dogs around them, but by others across the base. Military working dogs in other compounds, pets in base housing, even strays beyond the fence line. The sound spread like a wave, a call that transcended trained commands or learned behaviors. It was instinct, pack calling to pack. And somewhere out there, Ashley was certain, other dogs and handlers were hearing that call and remembering what they'd been part of, what they'd been forced to abandon but never forgot. "Ghost Pack never died," she said quietly, as the barking finally faded into the desert night. "It just went underground. Now it's time to bring it back into the light." The phone rang again. This time it was General Cruz. Handler 7, we've just received reports from 3 different locations. Military working dogs in Iraq, South Korea, and the Philippines have all exhibited coordinated behaviors that match what we saw here today. Their handlers are requesting immediate consultation with you. Ashley smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile anyone at Edwards had seen from her. Tell them GhostPack is reforming. All scattered units are to report their status and capabilities. It's time to come home. As she ended the call, Ashley realized the morning's fire had done more than save 23 lives. It had been a signal flare, calling scattered warriors back to a cause they'd never truly abandoned. GhostPack wasn't just being rebuilt. It was being revealed to have survived in ways no one had suspected. The 17 dogs around her seemed to understand. They'd been the spark that reignited something much larger than themselves. They were no longer just military working dogs who'd proven themselves in fire. They were the vanguard of a revolution that would transform military operations worldwide. And somewhere in Syria, a traitor named Harrison was about to learn that some things couldn't be killed with betrayal, some ideas couldn't be buried with bodies, and some packs couldn't be scattered beyond reunion. GhostPack was coming back, stronger, larger, and more determined than ever. The fire at Edwards Air Force Base had been the beginning. What came next would be the proof that partnerships forged in trust and tested in fire could survive anything, even death itself. As Ashley walked back toward the main base, the 17 dogs fell into formation around her without command or signal. They moved as one unit, casting long shadows under the security lights. Behind them, Marcus wheeled himself along, refusing offers of help. 2 handlers who'd survived the unsurvivable, accompanied by dogs who'd chosen to run into fire rather than abandon those in need. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Handlers to train, protocols to develop, skeptics to convince, and possibly scattered GhostPack units to reunite. But tonight, they'd proven that some bonds transcended death. Some partnerships exceeded human understanding, and some ideas were too powerful to die. The last sound that echoed across Edwards Air Force Base that night was Max's final bark, picked up and repeated by every dog within hearing range. It was GhostPack's traditional sign-off, learned from old videos but given new meaning by 17 dogs who'd earned the right to carry it forward. The message was clear to anyone who understood. GhostPack lives. GhostPack endures. GhostPack never leaves anyone behind. The story of Ashley Harper and the 17 military dogs is not just a tale of courage in the face of fire. It is a profound reminder of how we often underestimate others based on their appearance and job position. Colonel Blake dismissed the K-9 unit as dog walkers without realizing he was mocking one of the military's most elite warriors. The greatest lesson is about humility and the importance of recognizing true value. Every person, every job has its own worth that cannot be measured by rank or title. Those considered support personnel may possess special skills and invaluable experience we never knew existed. The story also speaks to the power of cooperation and trust. The 17 dogs didn't run into the fire because of orders, but because of absolute faith in their handler. Ashley didn't save 23 people alone. She did it through partnership with dogs, teammates who couldn't speak but understood responsibility clearly. Finally, this is a story about never abandoning what is right, even when facing severe consequences. Ashley chose to save lives over following orders, chose life over career, and that made all the difference.